All right. Go right ahead. I'll go get my iPad. All right, no problem, no problem. So yeah, so those who have access to Facebook at home, feel free to look at the presentation. It will be similar to one that we've done before, but I think with some, we're gonna add in some different things to be a little bit more applicable to what's happening now. Definitely. Oh, alrighty. So let us go ahead and begin. So I'm so glad to hear from you guys and to speak with everyone today. I was hoping our talk today could focus on the idea of anxiety and how to manage it in a time when we don't get to be out and about like we used to, in a time when a lot of us are in the house and have been in the house for maybe days at a time, or you can only leave the house for a little bit, and all the frustrations that come with that. But I wanted to really start off to see if anyone had any, if anyone wanted to share just some of their thoughts and their frustrations about what it's been like the last few days with all of this coronavirus and different things like that, some things that they've been dealing with. Yeah.
I was just telling my husband a few minutes ago that it appears that men are a little more restless than women. For me,
yes.
No, I don't think it is. Because I find that it's a bonding time when we're able to do things together.
Yeah.
We actually went for a walk.
Okay.
I don't know if that's fun, but we went for a walk.
Nice.
Around the neighborhood with my husband, my daughter, and myself.
Yes. Oh, that's perfect. Those are the kinds of things that you need. Absolutely. But I understand that there are definitely going to be some of us who are more restless than others. Those who are used to being a bit more active, a bit more outside, being distracted by different scenes, different sceneries, and different things like that. All of that can be impactful. Right? All right, so let's go to our next slide here. What does anxiety look like specifically when you're dealing with, what we have here, which is a soft lockdown, essentially, right? It's not an official lockdown, but it's the kind where they encourage us to be inside more than not. So a lot of that can turn into worry, a lot of worrying about what's this going to be like, what's that going to be like. Frustration, as we talked about, not being able to move around like we're used to moving around, restlessness. That's a big thing that's going to be happening. Difficulty concentrating, right? Or maybe you're used to, some of us can work better when we are actually at work, and working from home might be a lot more difficult. There's more distractions. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have food distracting you, whatever it might be. Irritability. A lot of us can have the tendency to be more irritable if we're stuck inside, right? Some tense muscles, difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. Has anyone experienced any of these? Is there anyone else? I know we're a bit limited in terms of our capacity today, but these are the kinds of things that happen often, especially when you're stuck inside. There's this idea, it's called really just cabin fever, right? Where you get tired of being stuck in one place, and when you don't get to be out, at least follow your usual routine, right? All right, so let's go to our Yes. I understand. I definitely understand. It's tough. It's tough to not be able to do what it is that we're used to doing. Even if it's not a really exciting life, it's still a change in our routine. That's pretty drastic. Right? And part of the frustration, I think, with this whole coronavirus is that we don't have an idea of when it's going to end. We're not fully sure. And that adds itself to anxiety, right? Because they'll say a couple weeks, 6 weeks, maybe summer, spring, whatever it might be. But that makes those of us who have a tendency to be anxious in general, to be even more anxious. So, what are some other ways that anxiety can look like? So, on our next slide, we have the idea of panic attacks. That's possible for some of us. And so, what it is I really want to name what a panic attack is so that when we experience it, we have a better idea of what it looks like. So, a panic attack is simply when you feel like your heart starts racing a whole lot faster than it usually does. It seems like it comes out of nowhere. You have a shortness of breath, which is, essentially you feel like you can't take as deep of a inhale as you're used to. Some of us start sweating, and there's a bit of a panic associated with it. And they usually tend to be short. They usually last 5 to 7 minutes, but it can be scary, especially when you first experience it. And oftentimes it feels as if it comes out of nowhere. Now, the reality is, it's usually a trigger of some kind. It might be internal in terms of our thoughts, something we were thinking about, or it might be something that we're seeing or fear that pops up. And with anxiety being raised in the country this high, those who are prone to panic attacks, you have a chance of experiencing more than usual. So also what we have is things that in terms of what anxiety can lead to, those of us who have already some irrational fears. When we say irrational fears, they're fears that aren't really based in logic. It's just sort of how we feel, right? And so if you were the type to already avoid using public transportation, you certainly aren't going to be doing it now, right? And of course, I know they've limited those who can use the metro and the bus and all of those kinds of things. And so that adds essentially to the anxiety. If you already had that avoidance of public transportation, that's one, right? If you already avoided wanting to be in a crowd, that's definitely one as well, right? And being outside, those of us with a fear of being outside, and some people have fears of elevators and escalators and planes and these kinds of things. While you might be comforted by the fact that, okay, well, I don't have to do that necessarily right now, it's still a bit of a frustration that when this all passes, you will still be exposed to those things, or you might have a chance to be exposed to those things once again, right? And so this is why we have to continue to keep an eye out on our anxiety and be mindful of those of us who tend to experience more anxiety than usual. All right, let's go to our next slide here. Now, what do we do about all this anxiety? What is it that we can do in this time where we are limited more than usual? First thing, and we know we have the sister there. Her name is slipping my mind right now. Who focuses often on our healthy diet and what that should look like. I'll only touch on that for a quick second, but that plays a really strong role in the idea of mind and body connection. Sister White talked about that as well, right? We have to be careful about what we eat in terms of our anxiety. Things that increase anxiety are going to be caffeine use, right? Eating a lot of caffeine, sodas, and things with a lot of sugar. Those aren't going to calm you down. Sometimes we think they are, but they do not calm us down. They increase our level of anxiety. So we must be mindful of keeping a healthy diet. What does that look like? If you're stuck in the house, or if you have to make a run to the store, make sure that you don't get just the worst snacks possible. Right? You want your fruits, your nuts, things that are high in protein, high quality meats, whole grains, all of those things. Those will play a role in keeping your body functioning in a healthy way, which then leads to your mind functioning in a better way as well. Also, exercise. Exercise plays a big role in keeping the blood flow in our mind continually moving on a regular basis, right? You want to be able to keep the blood flowing and not become stale and stagnant. And the way we do that is exercise. Now, it's tough to do that inside, absolutely. But Sister Bakari just discussed the idea of taking a walk with her family and how she enjoyed that. Take a nice short walk. Now, you still want to keep your social distancing, of course. Avoid crowds and people, but you can wave to a neighbor if you see them. If you can get out, even if the weather's not ideal, it was really nice yesterday. Today it's a little cooler, but it's the Sabbath. If you can get out, find a little park or just up and down your street, do that. that will be great for your mental stability as well as your physical health. And there's also a variety of indoor uh, exercises you can do as well. You know, we have our squats and our sit-ups, push-ups if you like, walking up and down the stairs while holding some books. Those kinds of things really help increase the blood flow and increase your mental acuity. All right. Another thing that's really helpful, I find, is using some calming techniques. Calming techniques are techniques that help you stay present and focused on what's happening around you and not being so caught up in the future. We'll talk a little bit more about the future in a second, but the calming techniques play a really large role in relaxing our mind and relaxing our body, right? And so we did some of this before, but I want to really continue to hone on this so you guys can utilize it as a technique, even without me prompting you. So we're gonna do two quick exercises. The first one, as we've done before, for those who might remember, it's called the progressive muscle relaxation technique. All right, so for all those listening, here's what we're gonna do. You want to be sitting, relax yourself a little bit, and then you're going to close your eyes. You're gonna follow my instructions to the T. All right, so first thing we're gonna do, you become aware of your breathing. You do not change it, just become aware of it. Now, on the count of three, we're gonna take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth, and we're gonna hold that for 3 seconds. We're gonna take a deep breath, we're gonna hold it for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Everyone, deep breath. Hold it. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release through your mouth. Let's do that one again. On the count of three, deep breath. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath. Hold it. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release. All right. On the count of three, we're going to take our shoulders and you're going to scrunch them up real tight by your ears. I'm going to hold that for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Scrunch them up real tight, tight. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release your shoulders back down. Now let's wiggle them around, get the blood moving in there. Let's do that once more. On the count of three, we're going to take our shoulders and we're going to scrunch them up by our ears. 1, 2, 3. Scrunch them up real tight, tight. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release and stretch out your shoulders. Get the blood moving back in there. Now, on the count of three, we're going to take our hands and we're going to make a fist with each hand. A nice tight fist on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Tight fist, tight, tight. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release. Stretch out your fingers all the way to the fingertips and then wiggle them around. Now, let's do that once more. Here we go. Tight fist on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Tight fist. Hold it. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release and stretch out our fingers all the way to the fingertips and wiggle them around. Now, on the count of three, we're going to scrunch up our toes as much as we can in our shoes or slippers or whatever it might be. We're going to hold that for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Scrunch them up real tight. 3, 2, 1. And release. Make sure you wiggle your toes all the way around too. Now, here's the kicker. This is what we're going to do. On the count of three, we're going to do all of those at the same time. So we're going to take a deep breath, scrunch up our shoulders, our hands, make a fist, and our toes. Breath, shoulders, hands, toes. Breath, shoulders, hands, toes. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Deep breath, shoulders, hands, toes. Hold it. 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale, release your shoulders, fingers, and toes. Let's do that again on the count of three. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath, shoulders, hands, toes. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release everything. Wiggle your shoulders, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, all that. One more time for the roll. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath, shoulders, hands, toes. 3, 2, 1. Slowly release. Stretch out everything as much as we can. All right. So for those who were able to engage in that technique, can anyone tell me how it is they felt afterwards? What did it feel like for you? Anybody who might have engaged in it? Hmm. Oh, yes. 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 Excellent. I'm glad. So it's one of those things that, as you can see, it's really easy to do. You can do it at work. If all you need is 30 seconds or so just to get a chance to slow things down and keep our muscles tense and then relaxed. You tense them, then you relax them. And it increases blood flow. And for those of us who keep our anxiety in our body, meaning that you're when you become anxious, you feel tense. Maybe your neck tenses up, you feel it in your back, lower back, maybe you have leg cramps, a headache. If you deal with any of those kinds of things, this is the kind of technique that can help relieve some of that stress, right? Now, there's no one thing that's going to erase anxiety completely. Anxiety is a normal part of human life, and it's necessary. It's a necessary thing that we must deal with, and in many ways, it's helpful, right? And so, we don't work on erasing anxiety. What we do is we work on minimizing it so that it doesn't completely take over our day. Now, there are going to be a lot of fears that pop up in our mind, especially around coronavirus and probably bills and all kinds of different things that are going to be popping up. Is your job being impacted? Many of ours is your money being impacted? All of this, these are legitimate fears and legitimate anxieties. And so it is our job to focus on what we can control. And what we can control is not so much about what's happening, but how we perceive it and how we deal with it. Right? A lot of this is out of our control, but how we deal with it is the most important thing. And it is our duty as people who want to be healthy, as Christians, as Black people, whatever it might be, to be intentional about our mental health. To be intentional about our mental health. So one of the so that first technique was good for calming the body. This next technique is good for focusing the mind. Sometimes our mind gets runs away with ideas and thoughts and different things like that, and they can be harmful because they can be anxious ideas and thoughts. So this technique is everyone who's listening will get a chance to do it themselves. We're going to focus on, it's called a grounding technique that focuses on five each doing doing two things with each of your five senses, two different aspects of each of your five senses. So let's go with the first one. Everyone, I want you to, we're going to use eyesight as the first one. So everyone listening, I want you to pick a color in your mind, right? Pick a color, a common color, a regular color, and then I want you to find 5 instances of that color in the room that you are in. 5 instances of that color in the room that you are in. It might be on the floor, it might be a table, it might be a picture, a poster, a lamp, a picture. 5 instances of the color that you picked in the room that you are in. All right. Hopefully we found 5 instances of that. Good. Now, next, what I want you to do is find something in your room, wherever you are, that is small, but there are many multiples of it, right? So, for instance, you might find ceiling tiles, or there might be marked tiles on the floor, right? Or you might have a poster that has words and you count the letters. Or you might have dots in your carpet or books that you can count. Find something around you where you can count up to at least 10 of them. And then I want you to count those out loud for yourself. Count at least 10 of them. All right, so I'll give you a second to do that. Something small where there are multiples of it. It could even be chairs if you have a bunch of chairs around you. We can count at least 10. People in a picture, for instance, is a good one too. All right, good, good, good. Now we're going to our next sense. The next sense we'll use is hearing. All right, you might be in a quiet place, but we're going to do our best. We want you to take a second, and I'm going to stop talking. We're going to see if we can identify at least 2 sounds around us. 2 sounds around us. All right, let's give 5 seconds for that. 2 sounds around us. All right, I'm hoping we're able to identify at least 2 sounds. And even if you can't, it's okay. Because the way that this technique works is just by utilizing the sense, you are achieving the purpose. Even if you end up not hearing anything, it's perfectly fine. All right, next sense. Let's do touch. What I want you to do is with both hands, touch something around you that is not you. Anything that's not you, touch something around you that's not you. Anything you can touch with both hands. And I want you to describe it to yourself in 2 different ways. Right? So describe not what it looks like, but how it feels. So you can do with the temperature. Is it warm? Is it room temperature? Is it cold? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it rough? Is it spiky? Right? Is it squishy? Does it give when you touch it? What kind of material is it? How could you describe it in terms of touch only? At least 2 ways to yourself. All right, that's a good one. Next, let's do smell. Smell. Now, you've likely been in your room for a little bit, and so you become accustomed to whatever the smell is, but let's do our best. Can you identify a smell in your room? 2 smells? Is it possible? Can you identify maybe it's a body wash, a cologne, a perfume, maybe you just cooked breakfast or lunch, or maybe it's the smell of your clothes, or maybe it's the smell of outside. Whatever it is, identify, so you can identify at least 2 smells. All right. Last one is taste. Taste is always a tricky one, but we do our best. With taste, we want to see, can you taste maybe the last thing that you ate? Not remember, but taste. Can you taste it still? And even if you can't, maybe you can still taste even just the saliva in your mouth, right? Maybe that's still a thing you can taste. Engage the sense and see what it is you can taste. So that technique right there is called the grounding technique. And what you might not realize is in the last 3 to 4 minutes or so, you are unable to think about anything else, right? You were focused on what is happening right here and right now. The beauty of our senses in this technique is the fact that our senses can only be engaged in the present. You understand what I mean by that? You cannot smell things in the future. You cannot see things in the past. You cannot hear things in the future. Right? We can remember what something smelled like. We can remember what something that we saw or something that we heard. But your senses can only be engaged in the right here and the right now. And on our next slide, you'll see how important that is, right? So with that technique, that, like I said, it's called a grounding technique, it helps bring you out of the future and even out of the past and keeps you right here, right now. And you see how, and it's important to not underestimate how impactful that can be. So often our ideas and thoughts about the future are focused on the what if. What if this? What if that? What if, what if, what if? And we end up going up that roller coaster of anxiety all the way to the top. And when you get to the top, you panic and you start to worry and you start to tense up and you start to forget all the important things that help keep you grounded. So those two techniques and the idea of staying out of the future is really important. When we get caught up in the what if, it's important to slow things down and realize and focus on the what is. What is happening right here, right now? What can I control? What can't I control? One of the things I give some clients that I work with is really helpful, and a super simple technique is simply making a list where you want to draw a line down the center of a piece of paper, and you make two lists. One list on one side are the things that you cannot control, the things in your life you do not have an identifiable impact on, right? So that might be, for instance, this Corona thing. It's hard to have an impact on that. It's hard to have an impact on when it's going to start, when it's going to finish. It's hard to have an impact on whether or not your boss will give you the time off or give you childcare leave or all of these things. It's hard to have an impact on those, right? Another one might even be even more simply people's opinion of you. It's hard to have an impact on that sometimes. And that often plagues us. So we have the list of things we cannot control, but then you make a list of things you can control. You make a list of the things you can control. And the thing that we have the most control over is the most important thing of all. And that's how we view ourselves and how we view and perceive the situations that impact us. You often cannot control the actual situation, but you can control how anxious it allows you to feel. Keep a list of the things you can control and things you cannot, and then ask yourself, where am I putting my energy? Where am I putting my energy? Where am I putting my effort and time into? Is it mostly on the things I cannot control, worrying about those kinds of things? Or is it on the things I can control, how I view myself? Am I being kind to myself? Am I beating myself up? All of these things are things we can control. Am I engaging in healthy mental health practices? Am I taking a walk? Am I eating healthily? Am I getting caught up in other things, or am I focused on what's the most important? We want to make sure not to ride that wave of anxiety when it comes, because the wave will take you out of where it is you're supposed to be and distract you from focusing on what it is that you can be doing. When those negative thoughts pop up in our mind, we must make sure to counter them. When I say counter them, is, for instance, if you say to yourself, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know how long we're going to be on leave. I don't know how long I can deal with these kids. The counter to that is, yes, I don't know these things, but I can focus on what I do know. A counter is simply saying either the opposite or a healthy retort to those negative thoughts. Don't let the negative thoughts run and rule your life and how you think about things. That is so important when it comes to anxiety. Now, we as Christians, as we move to the next slide, the thing that we have more than other people in times of anxiety is an understanding that we don't have to rely on ourselves solely when it comes to finding that sense of peace in anxious times. There's nothing easier to do than to find peace when there are times of peace. But can we find peace when things are not going the way that we want them to, when we have no control over what's happening? And those of us who are prone to needing and wanting control, these are the things that are going to pop up for you. It's going to be really frustrating that you have so little control right now. But thankfully, we have a God who we can rely on, who can take the control from us. And so I have just a few verses that you're certainly familiar with, but I want to make sure that you keep them in mind. And maybe take some time out this to spend some time really memorizing these verses, or at least just sort of meditating on them today and throughout the rest of the time that we have in terms of dealing with this coronavirus. The first one is John 14:27, where Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. So do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." We see there that Jesus is saying, I am not like the rest of the world. I'm not here to give you anxiety. In fact, I give you the opposite. I give you peace. So don't let your hearts be troubled, which is another way of saying do not worry, do not be afraid, but trust in me. I heard someone say once, it makes no sense to pray and then to worry, because those are two countering thoughts, right? It ends up being an oxymoron to pray and to worry. Our next verse is Psalm 55:22, where it says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." Right? And so a lot of that is the idea of not holding on. That speaks to control. Not holding on to those things that we're used to holding on to, and giving it to God. Another one is Matthew 6:34. "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." It's a really important verse because, as I said, so often anxiety is set in the future. It's about the what if, what if, what if. And here Jesus is saying, do not get caught up in the what if. Do not get caught up in what is frustrating you. Do not get caught up in the things you cannot control. Let God handle those things. And the last one I'll offer you is Philippians 4:6 and 7, my favorite verse when it comes to anxiety, where it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding," I prefer the King James there, where it says, "The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." It's a really powerful verse because it's telling you everyone's going to have something to worry about. But with prayer, petition, and thanksgiving, right, this idea of being thankful in the midst of your situation, you present your requests to God, and he will offer you not just a sometimes peace, or a peace that's okay for a little bit, but a peace that passeth all understanding, that transcends all understanding, a peace that doesn't even make sense. He's willing and able to offer that to us if we continue to place our minds on Jesus as we move forward. So there, I think, is a good place for us to pause for this week. I was wondering, do we have just any questions or any extra thoughts in the time that we have in terms of anxiety and dealing with all of the ups and downs and issues that we're experiencing in this time? Any questions or thoughts?
The Bible says that when Jesus was rich, you know, either. You know, I started figuring out the country extremely anxious last time I saw it in a news conference. And I asked him a simple question, and he just lost out.
Yeah.
How do you want to tell them what that is? But I realized that he was very anxious because of the impact. And then I said something more broad and real answer. You know, we have to pray for one another. You can not tell them a 30 minutes principle, but just have to pray for something that helps you is also a therapeutic thing.
Yes, yes.
But many times we focus on just praying for ourselves and our family. But when you pray for others, it engages you in a divine way, a very spiritual realm that God wants to progress in. And we can we could do it by blessing at this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this outline presentation.
Yes, thank you, Pastor Hutchison, and thank you, P.E.A.N. It's always nice. I'm so sorry we haven't been able to meet in person, but I'm looking forward to when we're able to do that. And thank goodness for the technology team as well for being able to bring us together this time.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Well, happy Sabbath. Mm-hmm.
Well.
Yes, yes.
So the fact that you got to respect the Dr. Juwanza McIntosh, but the wisdom you're giving us, the consecration, the skill, the well put together presentation, the illustrations, the spiritual foundation, the professional, technological, scientific foundation, and the way it was presented. Thank you for all you have heard. Thank you for that which will benefit today and every day during this crisis and beyond. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All righty. Happy Sabbath, everyone.
Thank you.
All righty. Goodbye.
When I won't feed it to you. Our prayer tonight is let our hearts cry.